Good morning. My name is Kenyon McDuffie. I'm an at-large council member and chair of the Council's Committee on Business and Economic Development. Today is Thursday, December 14th, 2023, and I call this meeting to order. I'm not joined by any additional colleagues right now, but we obviously welcome all the other members of this committee, as well as my other colleagues on the council. I want to thank everybody for being with us today. We're joined this morning by our two invited government witnesses from the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, Acting Deputy Mayor Nina Albert, and Director of Operations Naima Chambliss. Thank you both for being here this morning. I appreciate your time. We appreciate your cooperation and work undertaken by your team with our committee staff in preparation for today's hearing. The notice for this roundtable took place 1 month ago on November 14, 2023. Today, we will be discussing DMPED and its hiring and promotion practices, workplace culture, and alleged retaliatory conduct under John Falcicchio, former Chief of Staff for the Mayor and Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, and a summary of findings released by the Mayor's Office of Legal Counsel on June 17, 2023, as well as on July 31st, 2023. Certain unsubstantiated allegations were determined to be outside of the scope of the Mayor's Order 2017-1-313. These allegations included allegations of irregular hiring practices and promotions by the former Deputy Mayor, a hostile and inappropriate workplace culture, and unlawful retaliatory conduct by senior staff. This roundtable will focus on the policies, practices, and culture at DMPED determined by the MOC to be outside of the scope of Mayor's Order 2017-313. Almost 9 months have elapsed since the departure of former Deputy Mayor Falcicchio. I understand and share some frustration felt by many regarding the pace of investigations related to these matters. At the same time, this committee has worked diligently not to impede other ongoing investigations and to ensure the anonymity of the individuals who initiated the complaints against the former Deputy Mayor. This committee also invited the attorneys representing these individuals to participate in today's roundtable, but they declined. This committee sent emails to all DMPED staff informing them that they too could submit questions and comments related to today's subject matter to our committee, and that the feedback would be treated confidentially. We've received a few responses that will be reflected in some of the questions I'll be asking at today's roundtable. We also informed the DMPED team that both the Board of Ethics and Government Accountability, as well as the Office of the Inspector General, investigate ethics violations and abuse confidentially, and that those agencies should be engaged if there are concerns they'd like to see elevated there. Our office and committee also received allegations of improper conduct from a non-district employee. We've previously shared those allegations with the relevant investigative bodies involved. DMPED has been in receipt of the pre-roundtable questions that the committee provided to them since September and provided responses to us earlier this month. Those responses can be viewed on the council's website. And while I understand the need to refrain from commenting on matters that are still under active investigation, I'm a bit disappointed by the scant responses shared with our committee. I'm going to dig into that a bit deeper during rounds of questions. Acting Deputy Mayor Albert, you have been in this role for about 2 months, and you bring to the position a unique perspective as a former DMPED staff member. I appreciate the conversations we've had thus far and look forward to our continued work together on urgent economic development matters on behalf of the District of Columbia. It's not lost on me that we are 1 day removed from news related to the potential relocation of Monumental Sports and Entertainment from the District of Columbia to Alexandria, Virginia. And I'm upset by this development. From my own conversations with representatives of team ownership, I know that they shared frustration about the inconsistent communication they received from those involved in negotiation discussions. You may ask, what does this have to do with today's roundtable? I believe it speaks to the need for confident, collaborative, transparent, and focused leadership from you as well as your team at DMPED. This will not be feasible if DMPED's workplace culture is fueled by hostility, inappropriate conduct, and unlawful retaliatory behavior. At a time where it's hard enough to attract top-tier talent, district agencies should not be making it harder for those who have the talent we need to succeed in their careers. The district has a hard road ahead as we continue to work on our post-pandemic downtown recovery, and we must work together to attract meaningful economic development and retail options for the corridors across our city, particularly east of the Anacostia River. We must ensure that district employees across our entire government can do their jobs without harassment, better yet, in a healthy and safe workplace environment that promotes collaboration, equity, and belonging. I know this committee will be with DMPED again on January 11th and subsequently in February and March as we work on DMPED's performance and budget oversight hearings. It's my hope that we will have a productive conversation today about the concrete steps that DMPED is taking to address the issues that I've discussed and that have been laid out in various reports. So thank you. I'm going to turn now to you, Deputy Mayor. I'm not sure if you both have statements, but I'll turn to you for any opening statement that you'd like to make. And good morning to you. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Councilmember McDuffie and members of the Committee of Business and Economic Development. My name is Nina Albert.
I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor. I was not alerted that we had been joined by Councilmember Bonds, and I'm sorry I didn't see you, Councilmember Bonds. You entered rather quietly, but I'm so glad that you've joined us. I know you've been leading on a number of issues related to sexual harassment across District of Columbia. In fact, I've had a couple of hearings, so I'd love for you to take the time to make an opening statement.
All right, I will, and I'll be very quick because I thought you did more than adequate job pointing out why we're here. And good morning to our witnesses and our audience. And I really want to thank you, Councilmember McDuffie, for holding this roundtable. I must say, when we began this process of looking at the issue of sexual harassment, I thought maybe we were having too many hearings and too many discussions, but I feel very strongly that the issue is so important. We want to make sure we're getting it right as we move forward. So I welcome this opportunity. I think too, the public would be very curious about how DMPED operates as our focus on economic development and moving forward. Just as you said, given the most recent circumstances that have been unveiled, it's kind of important to know how this important, extraordinarily important office is going to operate going into the future. We can't always repair the past, but we can certainly move forward with in a very strident way for the future. And so I just wanted to put on the record, although we've had a series of other roundtables and hearings, including my November 14th roundtable on the implementation and the review of the mayor's order and our most recent updated order of 23-131, and subsequently a joint hearing I had with Councilmember Nadeau on Bill 25-351 titled the Sexual Harassment Investigation Integrity Amendment Act of 2023. As you've stated today in the hearing, Mr. McDuffie, this is an opportunity to shed additional light on our government and its workplace. My committee, we began our investigative process over the summer by sending each district agency a survey requesting raw data on sexual harassment complaints from FY 2018 through 2023. And we held a working group. And last week, I introduced Bill 25-621 with Councilmember McDuffie, Councilmember Parker, Gray, and Henderson, and it's titled Straightforward Approach for Fundamental Equity in the Workplace. Safe Workplace is the acronym that we're using, Act of 2023. And the Safe Workplace legislation provides a straightforward approach in handling sexual harassment complaints made during the district's government or made against the district government employees. It includes provisions cited in the mayor's newly revised order on sexual harassment, as well as a few points raised by our courts and of course by the council itself. Now, as we live and work in this new normal, the pandemic has left some serious effects that are felt across all the communities, such as professionalism, workplace culture, and of course, an increased emphasis on diversity. And so I'm hoping today we're going to hear from you as to what you're planning. Particularly, I want to know about any changes that you have made, and identifying the change, why the changes were necessary. And so I look forward to this hearing, and thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. Actually, before you begin your testimony, Deputy Mayor Albert, I'd love for you both to stand so I can swear you in. And you can raise your right hands, please. Do you each swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to provide before the Council of the District of Columbia and the Committee on Business and Economic Development is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you very much. You can be seated and you can begin your testimony.
Thank you so much, and good morning, Councilmember McDuffie, and Councilmember Bonds, as well as members of the Committee of Business and Economic Development. My name is Nina Albert, and I'm the Acting Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development. I have been in this role for about 2 months, and I've met the extraordinary people that work in DEMPED. DEMPED staff are proud, talented, and compassionate public servants. And despite the transition over the past 8 months, they do remain focused on delivering for the residents of the District of Columbia. DEMPED's mission is to advance economic opportunity in the district by creating and preserving affordable housing, creating jobs, and increasing tax revenue. The vision in DC's comeback plan is to be a city where every neighborhood offers its residents of all races and genders the chance to achieve their full potential. To be an urban center that is a destination of choice for innovators and job creators, and to be a place where people choose to live, work, visit, and thrive. To that end, since March, DEMPED has launched the Downtown Action Plan effort and opened the Sycamore and Oak Retail Village and the Whitman Walker Max Robinson Center at St. Elizabeth's East. We've also announced a new Whole Foods, a retail marketplace, and 3 new residential buildings at the parks at Walter Reed. We've successfully recruited new companies to the district and continued to offer and issue grants and new solicitations, including the 4th round of the Food Access Fund, which was announced just last week. As a DEMPED alumni myself, I am excited to return to and lead this office. I use the word lead because my job is more than overseeing policies and programs. It is also to lead people. In the Army, we have a saying, mission first, people always. I manage by that mantra and believe that my leadership experience is among the reasons the mayor has nominated me to the deputy mayor role. The steps taken to date by Mayor Bowser are the right ones, including calling on the Inspector General to follow up and conduct investigations for issues that the Mayor's Office of Legal Counsel was not able to opine on. The mayor has also issued a new mayor's order or an updated mayor's order on sexual harassment that reaffirms that DC government does not tolerate any form of inappropriate workplace conduct, including sexual harassment, both among and for its employees, as well as for the contractors and vendors that serve this government. I'm also happy to share some of the steps taken by DEMPED itself to strengthen its internal culture. We are in the process of developing the office's first racial equity action plan. This plan is being done in conjunction with the Office of Racial Equity, and it will serve as the roadmap not just for advancing racial equity within our organization, but also we're using this opportunity and this exercise for strengthening our workplace culture, looking at improvements to our operating systems, and strengthening our mission. DEMPED anticipates finalizing the Racial Equity Action Plan by the end of this fiscal year. Also, DEMPED managers and employees recently completed their annual performance evaluation process and established performance goals for this year. DEMPED staff have access to twice-weekly wellness meetings, including meditation. These are organized and conducted by fellow staff members. Finally, the office creates time for staff to be recognized and to get to know each other at events like our annual pie baking contest that occurred just last month, and the office potluck that we had yesterday, and through internal weekly newsletters, which highlight office achievements, makes new staff introductions so folks feel like they know their colleagues, and offers opportunities for staff to recognize their peers. So these are peer-to-peer recognition opportunities. Strengthening of workplace culture requires a commitment by leadership. It also requires clarity and consistency of communication to reinforce what the norms and standards of professional conduct are. And finally, it takes consistency of action to build trust. I look forward to receiving employee feedback about how to improve and enhance the DEMPED culture, because I know that having a strong, safe, and fair workplace culture allows employees to perform their best for the residents of the District of Columbia. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify, and both Naima Chambliss, who is DEMPED's Director of Operations, and I are available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony, Deputy Mayor. I do have some questions. I'm sure my colleague, Councilmember Bonds, has some questions, so we'll do 10-minute rounds. Thank you. Have you read the MOKE's public summary of the findings of the two cases of sexual harassment that were sustained both on June? There's one from June 17th, and the other was July 31st of this year.
I have read the summary report that was made public. I have not had access to nor have read the full report.
Okay. So give me impressions of those reports and your takeaways in terms of DEMPED's workplace culture under former Deputy Mayor John Facicchio.
Well, my impression is that there were multiple claims the MOLC reviewed, and where they could substantiate what the complainant had to say, substantiated it. And for those items that they could not substantiate it, the follow-up actions have been to bring in the Inspector General to look into those claims more significantly and more deeply. So I believe that the work done to date has really focused on what the complainant's issues have been, identified where there is enough evidence to substantiate the claims, and then made sure that there's follow-up. I think that this is appropriate. And in the meantime, the mayor within a week, made sure that actions were taken so that this behavior was clearly communicated would be unacceptable for going forward.
No, I appreciate that, and that was more of a description of the process, and I appreciate that, but I really just want to get your take on the culture, the workplace culture that existed at DEMPED under your predecessor.
Well, I can't speak to the culture that existed under my predecessor because I wasn't here. I know that Ms. Chambliss here is prepared to answer questions as somebody who has been here. But what I will say that is most important is that leadership is what sets the tone for culture. And I know what I plan to do going forward. I expect a high standard. I expect and communicate camaraderie and compassion for people. And it is with that combination of focus on professionalism, but care for the individual that I intend to support and lead this organization with. That's the culture that existed at DEMPED when I worked at DEMPED. And that's the culture that I look to maintain and promote going forward. And my experience to date is that employees have been really welcoming and excited about, first of all, having a named acting deputy mayor, and as well as just, I see it, the excitement and interest and willingness and desire to talk about work and to talk about policies that matter to this city. That's where I've seen the culture be focused, and I'm really excited for that.
So what I'm trying to tease out here is to get a sense of your assessment since you've been here of the workplace culture and essentially morale that exists in the agency? What did you inherit given the conduct of your predecessor and the outcome of the two investigations?
I think that the investigation, as well as the last 8 months, have just created a period of uncertainty, frankly.
Okay.
And I think that having certainty and named leadership in place is been a big boost to morale.
Okay.
So anytime there is change, that impacts morale. And I think that the last 8 months have been a period of change. And also, I think that people who do really hard work and good work want to be acknowledged for the good work that's being done. And I think that the last 8 months have been hard to focus on everything that's been achieved, because there's been other conversation that's predominated the work of DEMPED. And so I think, again, what folks I think are excited about are being able to move forward into an era where we're talking about what the challenges that we have before us are, and what the solutions to addressing those challenges are. And that's the tone and conversation that I look forward to promoting and to advancing during my leadership.
Okay. And what we're focused on, obviously, are the allegations in the complaints that fell outside of the scope of the investigation conducted by the mayor's office of legal counsel. And did you get a sense from the time that you spent here, understanding that it's been a couple of months, and that you've heard any concerns you've been contacted by, any sense that there are lingering effects of your predecessor's conduct that have to do with hiring, promotion practices, any bias, any retaliation? What's your take on that?
Well, I have shared with the team that I am in listening mode. I need to understand the past to know how we can improve in the future. We are going through both a structured process of getting employee feedback, as well as an open door, sort of opportunity for employees to share with me their feedback. The structured process, I think, is being really helpful to just, as you did, Councilmember McDuffie, talk to staff or pulled information from staff to understand what's on their minds. I'm doing that as well. And once I have an opportunity and keeping my mind and my ears open, I will then assess how we move forward. So yeah, I think that people are concerned about the past and they want to move forward. And that's what I'm hearing from folks. And again, as I said, I think that the most important things for establishing a healthy workplace culture is to communicate what the expectations are, to live up by those expectations, and to make sure that people feel appropriately welcome.
Thank you for your response. I alluded to in my opening statement the responses that we got to the committee's pre-hearing questions, and based on your opening statement and the agency's written responses to the committee, is it fair to say that DEMPED leadership has not investigated the allegations regarding DEMPED's hiring and promotion practices, workplace culture, and alleged retaliatory conduct that were determined by the MALC to be outside the scope of the mayor's order 2017-313?
So it is not appropriate for an agency to investigate itself. So DEMPED is not investigating from like a technical perspective its internal workplace processes. The mayor has referred this to the Inspector General, which would be an outside third party to follow up on the elements that the complainant has alleged. So that is the formal process. In terms of what DEMPED is doing itself internally, we're using this opportunity to take the temperature of people, to get feedback from employees so that we know how to strengthen our internal culture and processes. And we're capturing where we think that there's opportunity for operational improvements as well as culture improvements in our racial equity action.
Let me hone in on that then, because if one agrees that it's not the responsibility of the agency to investigate itself, you said you are conducting internal review as a part of the racial equity action plan. In terms of the racial equity action plan, it does a lot more than look at promotion practices, workplace culture, and potential retaliatory conduct, correct?
Yeah, it's not focused on those three things per se. That's
Right.
correct. It's a broader effort.
Right, and it's something that was initiated when exactly? You can just state your name for the.
Oh, Naima, I'm Naima Chambliss.
Okay.
It was initiated, we started that last year, so about May of last year of 2022. We got, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. You go ahead and finish your
No,
statement.
go ahead. That
No,
was
please.
2022, no, just May of 2022. The cohort consists of about 10 DMPED employees, and as employees filter out, you know, the agency we replace with another person, we make sure that the group reflects the diversity that is at DMPED. And that's the group that works together in conjunction with ORE.
Okay. And just to be clear, what it sounds like this is a part of, this racial equity action plan, is what the law, that is the REACH Act, the Racial Equity Achieve Results Act, requires. Is that correct?
That is part of it, yes.
Okay, and you know, having been the author of the REACH Act, I know that it was passed in 2020 and signed by the mayor in 2020 as well. December 7th is when the mayor signed it, to be precise. It sounds like you all are saying the work of DMPED related to these allegations of sexual harassment, specifically as it relates to this committee's purview around promotion practices, workplace culture, and alleged retaliatory conduct, is actually being done as a part of a racial equity action plan initiated even before the allegations were made or before the investigations were conducted?
Can I just make sure that we clarify the actions of the individual, the former deputy mayor, and any investigation of that is really, there's two components. One is, what is DMPED staff doing, and what is the office doing?
Sure.
The office is not the individual. Those are the individual, and the individuals, the allegations against the individual are being investigated as they should be.
Okay.
What the office is focused on is not just in the racial equity action plan, of course, includes what are your hiring practices, what are your promotion practices, because to achieve racial equity, we have to investigate those things. We as an office are taking this opportunity to take a look holistically at what improvements can be made to the office, including equitable hiring practices.
No, I appreciate that. And there's clearly a distinction between the individual and the office. And I think the bright spot in all of this is your nomination. I think a lot of people would agree with that. But what I'm trying to ascertain is what DMPED has done since the investigations have been conducted, and you are aware of the allegations around hiring, promotions, retaliatory conduct, bias by some of the senior staff that was not investigated by the MOG. That's the focus of this hearing. And what I've gotten in both in the pre-hearing questions, responses that you provided, and in your testimony today, is that it's being done as a part of a racial equity action plan that was passed in 2020, that you all started in May of 2022, before you were even aware, or it seems like before you were aware of this conduct. What I'm trying to hone in on is, after all this stuff has happened, what has DMPED done? What have you done specifically? What has senior leadership done specifically? And perhaps Ms. Chambliss, as the show, as the sexual harassment officer, what specifically are the steps that you all are taking to deal with these particular issues that have been identified but not investigated by the MOG or anyone else that I know for that matter? I understand and appreciate that you all have gotten around to the racial equity action plan, but what I'm hearing is you're incorporating into that process, perhaps, the issues that were identified months after that process started. And I haven't really heard anything that would indicate you have distinguished the conduct alleged in these investigations that have not been investigated by the MALC around hiring, promotions, retaliatory conduct, bias. I haven't heard anything as a part of this racial equity action plan that suggests you're focusing on those things rather than, say that we've been doing this process for a while now, and those issues that the committee is covering is a part of that process.
If I'll start with what
And I'm way over my time. I apologize, Councilmember Bonds.
Thank you very much, Chairman, but I think getting an answer will help us to move forward. So
Okay, thank
I
you. for
yield
that.
my time.
Thank you. You would say,
I'll start by answering what I've done in the past 2 months, because I've done a few things. And then I actually would like Ms. Chambliss to talk about things that have been done otherwise. As an opening statement, the things that protect us as an organization generally are what are abiding by the rules and processes that are in place. DCHR has a very robust set of processes. And so I think that setting the standard and making sure that we are abiding by those processes is part of, as an organization, what we have to do and reinforce. I've already made those statements toward that end. And for example, we mentioned the performance reviews. Part of people feeling and knowing what is expected of them for the coming year, and that they're being measured against SMART goals, measurable goals, is what establishes and creates and maintains a culture of accountability as well as fairness. And so one of the very first things as I came in said, I would like to make sure that we get compliance with performance reviews and performance plans for the year. It is that type of abiding by the rules that exist that needs to be continued to be reinforced from the top and permeate down through the managers. And so that has been done just in the 2 months that I've been here, for example.
Okay.
But I'll turn to Ms. Chambliss to talk about other things that have taken place prior to my joining, but since these allegations have been made.
So one of the things I think is important to mention is that whenever a concern is brought to DMPED leadership, we act quickly on it. We follow all DCHR processes and procedures for people who may want to, who have a complaint or have, a workplace issue. So when we are made aware of these things, we do move quickly. I will say since March, one thing that we've made sure of is that we have prominently placed throughout each of our buildings, sexual harassment officers, EEO counselors, ADA accommodate, have that stuff prominently displayed, have those things displayed for our staff members, and they are aware that they can, reach out to any show, reach out to any EEO officer if necessary. They're also aware that they can come to me. I am the HR person in our agency, so they can come to me. But I think we also have the information readily available on our intranet. So there were some places where there could have been, some gaps where someone could say, well, I didn't know where to find this. So we make sure now that it's prominently displayed, hard copy, soft copy, also sent it out to staff. I emailed to staff. So those are some things just to make sure everyone understands that we are promoting a workplace that is free of harassment. So that those are some steps.
okay, that's helpful to know.
Okay.
And just really quick questions and really quick answers would be helpful so I can turn to Councilmember Bonds, who's been patient with me going over my time. Sexual harassment training, is that required under the former order and the new order?
Yes.
Okay. And has everyone within DMPED been trained?
Yes. So current staff members have completed sexual harassment training for the previous fiscal year.
Okay.
So this fiscal year, they still need, we still have some staff members who need to complete the training. We are more than halfway complete. 53% of our staff have completed the sexual.
And were staff required to complete the training every fiscal year, once a fiscal year, or what was the time frame within which they had to complete the training?
Within the fiscal year.
Okay.
One time per year.
Okay. So have you received the training?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm actually the sexual harassment officer at DMPED.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Deputy Mayor Albert, have you received the training?
I have not yet, but I will.
Okay. Are you aware, Ms. Chambliss, is former Deputy Mayor Falchicchio ever received the training?
That is not something that I would be aware of. DMPED was separate from EOM. So any trainings, I would not be able to see if he completed them because he was technically an employee of EOM.
Oh, so as
So
the
I'm
Deputy
not
Mayor,
able to.
okay.
Go ahead.
Because he wore two titles. Got it. But you will be able to determine when and if Deputy Mayor Albert receives the training.
Yes.
Okay, so there's nobody who is out of compliance, who's a current staffer of DMPED, and it was a staffer of DMPED within the last fiscal year who has not completed sexual harassment training.
Correct. Last fiscal year. Yes, correct.
Okay. I'm going to turn to Councilmember Bonds. Once again, thank you, Councilmember, for your patience.
All right, thank you very much, Chairman. I wanted to try and understand tell me, how do you describe the current workplace culture? I know we've used some terminology that describes what has been done, but how do you describe the current culture? And I'll ask that of the acting deputy mayor.
Well, my experience to date is that it's actually been very positive. People want to talk about work. People come to me when I'm walking down the hallway and they catch me and they want to talk about the project that they're working on. They want to get my feedback on, what my thoughts are about how to advance it. We've been talking a lot about business attraction because that's going to be the focus of our future here. And they're anxious to share their ideas about how to do it. Are there ways to incentivize businesses to stay here, to come here? So I don't know if it's a virtue of my position, but my experience, I bring lunch to work, and I make a point not to eat lunch in my office, but to go to the lunchroom. And there's a group of about 4 to 6 people on a regular basis that come to the lunchroom and they talk to each other. And they've been very forthcoming and welcoming when I've joined them. So I see a desire of people to work within a community of professionals to talk about the work of this city. That's the culture that I've been exposed to. And honestly, I've been really hearkened and just humbled to both the professionalism that exists within the office, and people like Ms. Chambliss here, as well as many others who are stepping up to the plate during a time of transition to make sure that the office continues to be able to move forward and function and produce. And I think that I've just been quite impressed. We have not talked about negative things, and people are ready to move on. And that's what I've seen of the culture.
Thank you very much. What I'm really trying to get to is, surely within the office, you've been able to determine something about the work style of the individuals that you work with. And so I wanted to get an understanding of what are you seeing? Is everyone a type A, type C? Are people overly aggressive? You mentioned about the work that they're doing. Are you finding that folk are at your doorstep wanting to put forth their theory as to what you should be doing and how we should be doing the work? Just trying to understand the culture, because when we think about economic development, we of course think about aggressive opportunities. At least I do. And so I'm just trying to understand, how do you see the working style of those that you have within your office?
Well, I'll use a couple words. One is passionate. People are passionate. I don't see overly aggressive behavior at all. In fact, I see a lot of collaboration. I do see individual self-starters as a personality. Folks are typically responsible for a project or a set of grants or new communities. And so they tend to be deeply knowledgeable about whatever's in their individual portfolio. And the type of person that is in DemPed is somebody who wants to own and manage a portfolio and become an expert in that. And I frankly have gotten mainly feedback, both from employees as well as people, stakeholders, about how community oriented many of our project managers are, that they see them out in community, that they're a part of the community. And so the culture to me is actually the similar components to when I was there, which is community facing, customer focused, as well as people who are individual self-starters. I have not seen behavior that is out of expectation or overly aggressive, or on the other side, timid, because you can't have that either. People vary in their willingness to share with me what they're working on, depending on how junior or senior they are. But the folks who I work most closely with, which are senior level staff, have been very forthcoming with what they think needs to happen next. And then with staff that are more junior, or maybe I don't interface with as often, like I said, around the lunch table, want to talk about their projects and what they're doing. So I found it actually to be a fairly a healthy environment. And I think folks are excited to be able to talk about the work. And so that's what I'm excited to bring to to have us talk about in the future.
All right, well, I hear you loud and clear. I'm trying to get to this issue of perhaps individuals who are not as passionate, I'll use your term, as some, feeling, well, they haven't moved that ball fast enough. And so therefore, they're no longer included on an email list, as was an example given in some of the findings recently about your office, the culture of your office. So I wanted to really sort of ask you, have you noticed that there would be some individuals who could feel left out?
Well, I haven't seen that, but to your point, not everybody maybe feels welcome or has had a chance to interface with me. And so I think that the feedback responses that you've received, I would be open to and want to hear what those are, because then that becomes the foundation of what we need to improve on. I come from, and I believe very deeply in, an inclusive and a transparent culture, because it's when you establish those two criteria and modes of working that you get the best work and sense of belonging from everybody. And so, I welcome feedback from every employee, because it's only through their speaking up that I'll know how to make it better.
So, Ms. Childress, can you give us a sense of whether or not you, who have been in the office for a period of time, have experienced that or seen that or thought about a situation that might lend itself to being viewed as, someone being left out, feeling left out because they were not perhaps performing, or someone didn't like them?
No, I've never experienced that. If it was, if that ever happened and was brought to my attention, I would follow the processes to fix that. But that has never been my experience since I've been at DemPed, no.
Okay, I asked this question, I'm trying to push it because one of the findings was that there was an individual who felt that way. And it's seldom one individual, it's usually a culture. And so that's what we're trying to look at. What would, so if you saw it, what maybe were the circumstances to make someone feel that way? So trying to get to that. And then how are you going to correct it if you viewed it or experienced it, or Ms. Albert, if you even anticipate it could happen, how would you address that issue?
Well, I think that I need, like I said, there's communicating to people that I'm open to hear from everybody. And then there's the only way that you build a culture of trust is through your actions. So I get held accountable by the people within DEMPED if they see me taking action to make sure that there is a culture of inclusivity and transparency and fairness. So I'll put this on the record now, which is if there are people in DEMPED who have, feelings or experiences of not being included or being excluded for some reason, that I welcome those and that I need to figure out what the specifics are about how to correct that. But I intend to establish a culture of transparency and of trust, because it is with that culture that we're able to get the best out of people.
Okay, I'm just speaking of a situation where an individual has said, I'll use myself as an example, I feel left out. I mean, I see it every day. I'm not included. I have the same job title as Mary Smith, and yet I'm not included. What's going on here? Who do I go to? How will it be resolved, or will it be resolved? My work is suffering because I'm not getting all of the information that I need to perform. How would you handle that?
I think there are a couple things. One is there needs to be a couple people who they can come and talk to. I would say that Ms. Chambliss, as far as I've seen, is very well respected and trusted within the organization. So she's one person. I'm certainly at minimum a second person that they can come and communicate their concerns. On that specific example, I think that I need to understand what the circumstances are that they feel excluded from, but then perhaps it's management training. This is how we communicate as managers to establish a fair opportunity across your entire team. So if there's an opportunity to do some corrective action or coaching with managers, that's typically how you make sure that the employee who doesn't feel like they have a fair shot knows that there's going to be training and improvement to the supervisory cohort. That's what when I say I'm a leader of leaders, my job is to make sure that managers and leaders know how to create good environments for their teams. And for me to understand how to do that is from hearing from employees about what their challenges are and where they don't see parity. So I opened the door to that. I think it's when people start to see that take place that then over time we can rebuild trust.
All right, I'm over my time. I'm gonna
Thank
yield
you.
back, Chair.
We'll have several more rounds, I'm sure. The Malk investigation referenced unsubstantiated allegations of retaliation against at least one of the complainants by senior DEMPED staff. I want to get that's the way I can ask this, is whether you have specifically explored which existing senior team members were accused of retaliation, and do you know who they are, if anybody?
I do not.
Okay. Is there a reason why you don't think you should know? I guess I'm thinking about the timeline, right? So I'm thinking about your responses to the committee about the Racial Equity Action Plan and the pending Inspector General investigations. Do you have a sense of how long it's going to be before those are completed?
I do not. Do you know?
We do not.
Okay. And what about the Racial Equity Action Plan?
Your question is when it will be completed?
When will that be completed?
by the end of this fiscal year. So by the end of FY '24.
So if there is somebody who is on the senior staff who may have retaliated against an individual who worked on the staff, you're not concerned about whether that person is on the staff for as many months as they will be until the completion of the investigations that have to occur?
The resources to individuals who feel that they are being retaliated against or that they are not being treated fairly, the resources are Ms. Chambliss as our sexual harassment officer. But not only that, she also heads up our operations. So she is a resource to everybody in DEMPED. If there's a concern that is currently taking place, I am also a resource to that, and encourage employees that if there is something taking place now, to not be shy to bring that forward. It is through individual coaching of managers and corrective action that we take responsibility and take action now. The Racial Equity Action Plan is not a corrective action plan. That's not what it is. It's about how to strengthen our culture and how to improve operations. So if there are issues that are of concern at this moment, then the people at DEMPED have resources who are neutral, who are outside of their management chain, to come and bring their concerns to. And if they don't feel comfortable speaking with somebody within DEMPED itself, there are other resources, including the city administrator's office, who they can go and bring a complaint to. So that is how you manage the immediate while we work on the longer term.
No, thank you for that. And it sounds like that would be the process prospectively if somebody makes an allegation of retaliation. But I'm speaking specifically about an allegation of retaliation that's already been made, that you already are aware of, and what steps have been taken or will be taken to address the existing allegation of retaliation that was not investigated by the mall because it fell outside the scope.
Well, the specific action is being referred to the Inspector General. If there are continued actions that need to be dealt with, then those would be new allegations, and those would need to be addressed and brought forward.
Is it not possible to address the existing allegation in the manner in which any future allegation would be addressed by the agency specifically?
Well, it's been referred to it's been referred to the Inspector General to investigate.
So that specific allegation of retaliation or the broad allegations that fell outside the scope were part of the mayor's request to the Inspector General?
Correct.
Okay, and so back to my original question, you won't know specifically as the deputy mayor anything about that allegation until the conclusion of the Inspector General's investigation.
Correct.
Does that not concern you at all? Is there not something you think in the interim you might do? I'm really wondering because my concern, and we don't even know if these allegations are actually true. It's just they haven't been investigated because they fell outside the scope. And the mayor, to your point, has requested that they be investigated by the Inspector General. I know you referenced the council's emergency that required the investigation by the Inspector General, and I know that process is ongoing. It's going to be months until that's done, and I wanted to raise it because I don't know who the complainant is, whether that complainant is still a member of DEMPED staff, whether the complaint is true and the senior official is still on the staff. What I do know is if I'm you, I would want to know. And it causes concern to me that that process could go on as long as it likely will without any information at your disposal. So I appreciate your response, but I wanted to just make sure that I understood clearly what that timeframe looked like, and whether there's anything specifically you were doing in the interim to try to ascertain who that person is or whether there's any merit to the allegation.
I am not pursuing that because there is an investigatory process in place. Having said that, I am interested in establishing resources for employees if there are actions or inappropriate actions or otherwise now, so that we can manage we can manage that. That's my focus, and I think it's given the complexity of this issue, the appropriate approach.
Okay, and that, I think probably, I was gonna ask a question of whether or not this was your choice or whether you've been instructed to wait until the conclusion of the IG investigation. It sounds like you're making the choice that the investigation has been, that the mayor has referred this to the inspector general. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you made a choice to wait until that investigation is concluded.
I'm not waiting. I want to make sure everybody understands that, and that the council understands, we're not waiting on making sure that workplace culture, that there are resources to individuals if there continue to be concerns aren't available. We're putting that in place. That has been put in place
Right.
already. And what I think is most important is for people to understand and trust that leadership matters, and that I intend to establish both a culture and set of processes that protect individuals, but also allow us to keep focusing on a culture of professionalism that serves the District of Columbia. That's my goal. And so the specifics of a pretty complex investigation has to be held by people who are experts and who are outside of DEMPED. And so I am relying on that process to investigate the allegations made without predetermining, what the outcome of that is. What I need to do in my tenure is to really focus on making sure that people know that they have resources available to them if they see or are experiencing any of these workplace culture concerns, bullying, unfair promotion practices. That needs to be brought to my attention now. I'm not waiting for an investigation to take action on complaints or feedback that I would receive now.
Last week, two council committees, including one chaired by Councilmember Barnes, held a joint hearing on Bill 25-351, the Sexual Harassment Investigation Integrity Amendment Act of 2023, which included testimony from Inspector General Daniel Lucas. And the Inspector General expressed concern that having a large number of potential sexual harassment claims requiring external counsel is costly and could result in uncertain budget variability. So while the independent investigation may be warranted, I don't believe the intent of the council's actions is to discourage agencies from directly addressing identified issues and waiting for the OIG and their outside counsel to complete their investigations. It sounds like you might agree with that in terms of your statement that you're not waiting, and if something comes up, you're going to explore that. I'm not mischaracterizing, am I?
No, I mean, we have put in place processes and personnel so that if there is a complaint, that it can be dealt with currently. As it pertains to the investigation that is ongoing, really, the Mayor's Office of Legal Counsel they've addressed what they can, and they've referred
Right.
that case. So further investigation is needed, but there's nothing that prohibits an employee now, today, from reaching out to either myself or to Ms. Chambliss or to other EEO and other agencies that have similar people who are designated to
Right.
receive complaints.
So let me just, and I'm over my time, so let me just make sure that I'm clarifying so I understand correctly. There is a distinction to be drawn between an employee who comes forward tomorrow with a claim of retaliation and how you and DMPIT would handle that is distinguishable from the allegations that are related to your predecessor and the complaints that have been made because of the way that those have been handled in the ongoing investigations?
Well, I don't know about that last part, but yes, the allegations that have already been brought forward are being investigated or will be investigated.
But they're being handled differently because of the way that
They're
the
being-
events that have transpired relating to those two complaints?
I'm not sure if they're being handled differently. If there was a new complaint that we determined needed to be handled through investigation, we would investigate it. So I don't know if it'd be handled differently depending on the nature of the new complaint.
Investigated, it sounds like.
Well, there's a escalation process, candidly. This is the
I'm
way it
gonna
always
stop,
works.
and I'm gonna come back to this because
Okay.
I want to stop going over my time. I apologize, Councilman Barnes. You're around, please.
All right, I'm listening to the attorney in you. Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to see if we could, you've said a lot from your witness table today about how you see the culture, how you would attempt to handle it. And it leaves me wondering if there aren't, sounds like we have an office where you have divisions of work based on projects. And having been in and around government and in leadership positions myself for many moons, I know what that might feel like. When everyone is, spinning their own so-called plates on a straw. And just wondered, how is DMPED organized? And do I have a wrong view of it being just individuals, projects, things sometimes collide, sometimes they continue on for, eons, sometimes they happen very quickly in 90 days. And I'm really asking this question because I'm trying to understand what the real culture might be in the office based on how it is organized to get the work done. So how do you see it? Do you find it different from, let's say, the federal government, Ms. Albert, or other offices, or from the DMPED that you remember from a few years ago?
So the way I think DMPED is appropriately organized, DMPED's role is twofold. One is to make sure that we are looking at across the horizon at economic development policies, housing policy. So we don't execute. We have the DC HFA, we have the Housing Authority, we have DHCD. These are agencies that execute and that we collaborate with on housing policy. So we, for example, and you could say the same thing about kind of branding and marketing the city. There's other agencies and entities that execute or deliver a lot of that. So we're in that particular realm. We are a convener and a synthesizer of what is happening within our cluster. And so we have people who are analysts. They sit in the chief of staff's office. They look at the economic performance of the city, and they are true analysts across the board. So there's a team of people that do that work. There's another group of people that really focuses on business attraction. That includes managing grants. And so that's a team of, count off the top of my head, maybe 15 or so folks. They are, really our forward-facing team. They have assigned projects, but they also collaborate and manage as a team, and they're a small group. Then we have a real estate team, and the real estate team is focused on major initiatives, major projects that require to be in the deputy mayor's office so that they can work with DDOT and DOEE and other agencies. That's why these projects exist in the deputy mayor's office. So there's a combination of need to be in the deputy mayor's office so that there's citywide reach, so you can effectuate a complex project and deliver it. And yes, people are project managers, but they also collaborate because the nature of the work is complex. So how that impacts culture, to me, is more about, do the managers have the tools to empower people? Do they understand how to do that? Do they have the tools to know how to be good managers? I was trained to be a manager. I started off my training when I was in the Army. I literally had tools and training on how to manage people. So my first question is, are our managers trained to manage? So that's something that I'm looking into. That impacts culture. But the way the organization is organized, to me, is appropriate for the breadth of work that we do.
Thank you very much for that comment. And I really wanted to make it clear that we are looking at how you are organized in order to get work done, and it does impact how people view their role. But you have described three sort of universes under one cover. And I see Ms. Chambers over there enjoying this discussion. You have something you would like to add?
The way Deputy
Okay.
Mayor Albert put it is wonderful. I was thinking all of our units intersect somehow with each other, and it's never an isolated instance when they would, interact with each other. So the way Deputy Mayor Albert put it.
Thank you
great.
very much for that point, and that's
Oh.
where I've been trying to go all along. The fact that everyone feels that this organization, DMPED, is so vital and what they're doing is so important. You could, as an employee at any of the levels, perhaps, feel like somehow you're left out. Or you could feel that you're being inundated. You have too much work. I've actually had employees tell me, I got too much work. So you might fall into those categories. Let's talk a little bit about bullying. That's always an issue in any environment. Have you had situations where, I'm asking Ms. Chambers now, have you had situations where individuals might talk to you about what they consider to be bullying, or maybe they consider it maybe harassment, and they're really being bullied, or they feel that?
Thank you. No, none of those, that has never been brought to my attention. I've never had anyone come in and say, I feel harassed, or anything that would even seem like retaliation, bullying. That has never been brought to me.
That's very interesting. Thank you for that answer. But are you telling me that the investigation and the findings that the mayor's legal office conducted, that this is the first and only time in your tenure in the office that you've heard of any harassment or any pressure within the personnel from another?
That is correct. And the first time I was made aware that I learned of it was from the report. That was never brought to me.
All right, and you've been in DMPED for how many years?
I've been at DMPED since the end of April 25th, 2022.
You're a newbie. Okay, all right, that explains. And I asked that because, I mean, the issue of harassment is something that could happen anywhere, anytime, and it's usually not an isolated situation. So I'm trying to maybe understand, there are situations where people may lean over your desk and you really wish they would get away, or bad breath, whatever. But they do it regularly, trying to share information with you. And that could be, like, I'm uncomfortable, get off my chair, that kind of, just wondering. Surely it's been a situation once or twice. No?
If I may just step in, the processes that must be in place are to have resources so that if employees do feel that they are being harassed or that there is something inappropriate, that they have a place to go to bring a complaint forward. That's a distinction, that level of bringing a complaint forward so it can be investigated or sought into. That's usually when an employee has really, the experience is starting to become an unhealthy one for them. I don't think that it's fair to ask, any manager of people whether or not there are individual incidences that occur on a day-to-day, on a weekly basis where somebody leaned too close. That is a very different, I think, threshold of concern. And what's really important going forward, or even in the past, employees need to know who is available to them when there is actions that are being taken by their colleagues or by their managers that makes them feel uncomfortable to a point of bringing a complaint to. And so I think that Ms. Chambliss has said that she is a trusted person within our organization, but even if somebody did not feel comfortable talking to her because she is from within the organization, sometimes that's a dynamic that people understand within DEMPED, that if there is a concern, that they have another resource outside of DEMPED to bring that complaint forward. It's a very important mechanism that really ensures and is the way that employees who feel harassed, bullied, or uncomfortable can bring that complaint forward versus the individual, he was standing too close to me, she was standing too close to me, and that was inappropriate, And what I want to do is create a culture that employees, if they feel that way, can even talk to their colleague and say, hey, I have like a personal space boundary, please take 3 steps back. I mean, that's the goal, is to create a culture where people feel comfortable sharing with their fellow colleagues, or even say to their manager, hey, let me give feedback so that we can get back to good. That's the goal.
Thank you very much for that response. I'm over my time too.
Thank you, Councilmember. I want to give you opportunity to if you could speak to, there were some allegations about a pattern, and allegations that suggest a pattern might exist of DEMPED employees being directed to meet at the homes of senior level staff for work-related reasons. Do you know whether or not there is a pattern or that culture exists within the agency?
I do not know, and I have not seen that.
Yeah. I want to give you the opportunity to walk me through what precisely would be the steps taken if a new allegation from an existing DEMPED employee related to your predecessor was made. If you could, take me through what would happen.
I think if a new complaint was brought forward against my predecessor, given the complexity of the different allegations, we would refer that complaint to the MULC, or potentially maybe the MULC would need to decide if that becomes a part of the IG investigation.
Okay, so anything that comes up prospectively because of the existing investigations associated with those complaints would be referred to the MULC to handle.
If there were new, I thought your question was if there were new complaints that related to my predecessor.
Yes.
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 That would be referred to the MULC.
Okay. Okay. So anything new, even if anything new regarding your predecessor is going to go back to the MULC. And and the rationale is because of the complexity of, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want to make sure I understand it clearly though.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, because of, there's a, number of different cases and it should be handled consistently by the government.
Okay. All right. I wanted to ask, I made a note somewhere. Now I have to find where I made my note so I can ask my question. Give me 1 second. I just want to get a sense if either of you know how many people have been hired at DMPED since March 17th of this year?
Yes, since March 17th, we have onboarded 15 employees.
Okay. And give me a sense of the types of trainings that they're required to participate in once they're onboarded. Anything related to the topic of this hearing?
So once they're onboarded, they would, depending on when they come into the agency, they would just be responsible for participating in the same trainings that people who are already in the agency would be responsible for. So the sexual harassment training, unrelated to the cybersecurity, just the basic trainings. There is no one specific, for new employees.
But the training that they would be required to participate in related to the topic of this hearing is the sexual harassment training that you said earlier. Everybody on staff, save maybe a couple, sounds like the deputy mayor has yet to have hers, but everybody else has had that training.
Correct.
Okay. I wanted to get back to the work that is happening related to the Racial Equity Action Plan. And so the line of questioning earlier in the hearing, I do still remain concerned that a lot of what seems to be DMPED's actions related to harassment, retaliation, potential bias are being done as a part of a broader racial equity action plan, one that started last year. And I want to give you all the opportunity to state whether anything associated with the Racial Equity Action Plan since March 17th is specifically related to the allegations made by the complainants that fell outside of the scope of the Mox investigation. In other words, is there anything in the Racial Equity Action Plan that was introduced as a result of these matters?
So the Racial Equity Action Plan, I don't want it to sound like we started this plan, in 2022 and we'll be, it's going to take us 2 years to do it. This is a working plan that has gone through multiple iterations considering new developments. So I think one part of the plan that may not have been in last year, but is included now, is taking a deeper dive into the culture of DMPED and having a portion of that plan directly related to how individuals view DMPED's culture post March 17, 2023. So that's something that was added in. So like I say, people filter in and out of DMPED and people filter in and out of the team. But one thing that has been constant is saying we need to hone in on how do people feel working at DMPED, and and allowing people to have an anonymous, way to share that information.
And so
with us.
that component about DMPED's culture was added after the allegations associated with former Deputy Mayor Falchicchio, and perhaps specifically because of those allegations, to make sure that staff was getting some orientation around workplace culture.
Correct.
Okay.
That was yes.
Okay. And I want to hone in a little bit more on that. Give me as much detail as you possibly can about what that entails as a part of the Racial Equity Action Plan. Like, I know, Deputy Mayor, you mentioned it in your opening statement. I think you referenced it a bit, but I think it's specifically on point to what this committee is looking at. And since it was something that was added to the work of the Racial Equity Action Plan, I'd like to sort of lift that up and have you talk a little bit more about what that entails and what the goals and objectives are with that specific component of the REAP plan.
So that was, like I said, brought up shortly after March. So one of the things, it actually was part of the team saying, members of the team, just all of us, needed a reset. Everybody just trying to understand how we should move forward just internally. So the plan was something that the culture piece was just a way for us to look at, even our, people leaving, the turnover. We wanted to analyze all of those things. So that was something that everyone on the team got together and just said, we should look at culture specifically. What is, how people work, what makes people, when they do leave, what makes them leave, what makes people want to come to DMPED. So there were a lot of different factors that we wanted to analyze by incorporating the culture piece into the plan. Go ahead. No, go ahead. The plan is still working, but we do have a way for staff to share, feedback and analyzing those results. That's something that we were very proud of to have started prior to Deputy Mayor Albert's arrival. And I'll let her speak to how she plans to use the data that's born from that.
And in answering, can you also talk specifically, you mentioned in your opening that you looked forward to receiving employee feedback about how to improve and enhance the DMPED culture. If you've started to get that feedback, or if people have raised any concerns around the workplace culture, can you speak to that as well?
I think people have shared kind of a range of, feedback from, things that they think that could be improved and fixed, both internally as well as policies, all the way to what they're excited about. I'm still internalizing a lot of that and processing it. As I hear this conversation today about culture, I just want to make sure that I help frame how I think about establishing culture. First is many organizations establish core values. That tends to drive culture. In different organizations, maybe it's respect, excellence, teamwork, customer service, all of those types of things. But you don't establish a culture that is anti-bullying. That's not about a core value. Anti-bullying or harassment, that has to be handled very thoughtfully and carefully, because it tends to be, if you're guided by respect for individuals, teamwork, excellence, that's what gives permission to employees within that organization to hold each other accountable from deviating from those core values. It's a soft contract between individuals and employees in that organization that gives them permission to say, hey, we're stepping outside of our core value of respect for each other. I just want to make sure that we understand that that's how you shape and ensure a healthy culture, not by trying to solve for anti-bullying. That you have other protections for, including a safe place for employees to go to when they don't feel that, or they feel that they've been subject to, for example, a hostile work environment.
Thank you for that. I'm over my time, but when I come back, I want to you to elaborate on what you were saying earlier about some of the concerns or things that staff have articulated as a response to your engaging them around workplace culture, and some of the conversations that you mentioned, I think took place since you've been there. You talk generally that you've heard some things, a range of things, but I love to hear more specifically some of the things, if you can share with us, that you're hearing from folks. But you can hold that answer until after Councilmember Bonds is round.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I really wanted to follow up on the stepping outside of core values and just sort of looking at situations that might cause individuals in the workplace to step outside of showing respect for each other, as an example, because we know that these situations happen. And I'm sure you're familiar with them. And so I wanted to ask, how do you perceive the office handling that situation? You know, we're working on a project, you didn't do your part, and I'm very angry. Do I express it? And most likely I do. And what is the chain of command for getting that information to you as the leader of that office? And then you get that information, how will it be handled? What I'm trying to do is I'm back to how an individual can perceive what happens in the routine course of business, as you say, you know, holding each other accountable, and maybe an individual feels this is extreme, and so therefore you're harassing me, you're bullying me, you know, now you won't tell me everything, so you're mad at me. This is human nature. It's not something that we can put in a box and have it captured. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, so you said it perfectly, council member. There is human nature and there are feelings when humans are involved. What we want to do is make sure that people have the communication tools available to them so that ideally it would be a person-to-person communication, and that the culture is open and allows for that. That's the ideal, that people can learn how to work things out and express to their colleague or to their manager, hey, I didn't feel like I got a fair shot, or I had a great idea and you didn't pay attention to mine, but you paid attention to somebody else's. Ideally, you create a culture that allows for that. And what I think is there are a couple tools that allow people to do that. One is understanding there's things like DISC, right? There's all these different battery tests that teams can do, because there's team dynamics that are influenced by the individuals within them. Are you all analytically focused? If you're like me, are you somebody who speaks in concept? And how do we bridge that communication gap? So DEMPED, for example, has done one of those battery assessments so that the teams within DEMPED can understand, oh, this person communicates and thinks that way when communicating with them. You know, here's how you do that. So I think that if we could incorporate, I'd be interested in incorporating those types of exercises more regularly, so that medium or forum for having a neutral conversation about how to make the team stronger and how interpersonal communications can improve, that would be the ideal. So doing that more regularly is a step toward establishing and reinforcing a culture of open communication. When conflicts occur that need more than that, there is a mediation process that's available to people, so that there can be an intermediary to help navigate that communication difficulty. So that exists within DEMPED already, but we can make sure that those resources are known to people, that when they can't communicate person to person, that they have, again, a non-disciplinary means of mediating and navigating a hard conversation. But of course, sometimes there are actions or circumstances where now we are into a realm of unacceptable and non-professional workplace behavior. And that needs to be handled through care, because we don't want people bringing forth allegations that then, that need to be substantiated before you take action. And there's an investigatory process for that. That's, to me, how you start to parse and create a culture that is open and full of professional respect.
All right, and so then, should I assume that your racial equity plan, since it is a working document, it would contain this kind of information, which could be sort of a guide to employees as to expectations, as it relates to accountability, as it relates to the human dynamics of working with others, as well as if there is something really wrong where someone has touched you or you just cannot get them off your back, so to speak, you can come to and go through a very specific process.
Well, I'll let Ms. Chambliss talk about the specifics of the Racial Equity Action Plan. I don't want anyone to think that the Racial Equity Action Plan is a substitute for a manager's guide or operating principles. These are things that, as a leader and as a manager, that I and my chief of staff need to be establishing and creating as part of our, these are our responsibilities as leaders to do. So the Racial Equity Action Plan is not, the end all be all. This is what I know about managing organizations and leading organizations so that they can perform at the top, which is at the fundamental is a set of core values that everybody understands and has agreed to live by. And that we are very transparent as managers and leaders about where people can go if they feel or experience that their colleagues or that their bosses are not living by those core values. That, to me, is what starts to put into place the discipline as well as the expectation for what the norms of our organization are. But I'll see if Ms. Chambliss has any. I just don't want there to be a misunderstanding about what the Racial Equity Action Plan is. I think it was designed to ensure that we have equal opportunity for job growth and improvement among people of all backgrounds. That's what I think the original intent was. It's expanded beyond that because of the investigations heretofore that we've been talking about. But in terms of what the managers and the leadership's responsibility, which is mine ultimately, in terms of establishing and making sure that culture is good, I'm not sure all those components will be in the Racial Equity Action Plan.
All right, I appreciate that, because I was getting the impression that everything that's this Magna Carta would contain it all. So thank you, Ms. Childress.
Yes, the Racial Equity Action Plan, to be clear, is not a cure-all for everything, that has occurred at DMPED, but it is a way for us to gather staff feedback and use that as data for a path forward for DM Albert. So that is the main goal of the plan. I think it's important to also note that, like you said, I'll use your example of Mary. Mary may not be comfortable to come to me, but Mary may be comfortable to share her feedback, in a different way. And we still get that to be able to see how we can make improvements at DMPED.
All right, thank you very much. And in my last few seconds here, you indicated that you've added new staff, 15. You mentioned that. Is that, you want to?
That number? Okay.
Yes.
So that count, we've actually added 7. So I'd like to put that on the record.
Well, you've added 7.
Yes.
So my question is, how many personnel have left DMPED? As of, I think you gave March 15th.
March 17th?
Yes, okay, 2023.
So since March 17th, 9 employees have left DMPED.
Okay, 9 have left.
Yes.
Okay, and what category of personnel does the 9 represent? I heard about the 3 divisions within your office.
There are more than 3 divisions, but when you say, Councilmember, when you ask what category, what do you mean by that? Do you mean business unit? Do you mean career
Yes,
service, MSS? What do you mean when you
no,
ask that?
not FTE categories, but the work that they're doing. The units,
I know what you mean. I know what you,
administration.
no, I know what
Okay.
I know what you mean.
Components.
I understand. I understand. They are in, I won't give exact counts, exact numbers in each unit, but people who have left have been in the BD unit and real estate units.
And can you tell me why you would not give me the number?
You need
only
to. No, that's not a problem. In business development, the count is 4
Okay,
and
real
real
estate,
estate 5.
5. All right. That was easy. Thank
Okay,
you very
no
much.
problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. Give me 1 second, make a note. And I want to note that we've been joined by Ward 5 Councilmember Zachary Parker. Councilmember Parker, we're doing 10-minute rounds. I just have a couple more questions that I'm actually going to do, and then I'll turn it right over to you. I'm glad that we left off with that line of question because I think it picks up where I want to ask. Well, before I go to the questions about, well, no, let me actually go ahead and do that first. So I asked earlier how many people have been hired since March 17th, which is when the deputy mayor departed, the former deputy mayor departed. And you mentioned 7. And how many have been hired since Deputy Mayor Albert's arrival?
1.
1.
Yes.
Okay. Not including the deputy mayor.
Not include, no, so
Okay.
2, including her,
Okay,
but 1,
all right.
yep, 1.
So 1 person has been hired. Deputy Mayor, have either you or Ms. Chambliss looked at the hiring practices at DMPED to determine whether or not any changes needed to be made?
I mean, the hiring practices at DMPED are consistent with DCHR's hiring practices. So I've just, relied on those practices and not others, but I'll let Ms. Chambliss speak to the
Okay.
anything that might be different than that.
No, that's correct. The hiring practices, since I've been at DMPED, we follow all DCHR procedures for hiring.
Can you give me a sense of what, just generally speaking, what an onboarding of somebody looks like through DCHR?
So
And then-
onboarding or prior to them coming. So you want the them applying for the position
No,
or just the on?
I'm
just-
more interested in the
once
interactions
there.
with DCHR and DMPED specifically.
So DCHR comes into the process towards the end of the conditional hiring process. So DCHR, they are the ones who verify the information, verify.
I think
know,
I misunderstood your question, right? So I may have confused you a little bit. When you were saying before, I thought you meant like, I wasn't sure what you were referring to, but now it sounds like you were referring to, so they interact with DMPED first, and then DCHR?
They interact with DMPED.
Okay.
DMPED interacts with DCHR.
Okay.
Does that?
Yes,
so-
that's helpful to
okay.
know. So if you
Okay.
could describe that process of just somebody responds to
Okay.
a vacancy
Yep, I
announcement,
got
et cetera.
Okay. So a position is posted, someone applies. The position closes, we go through, myself and my team go through the applications. We see who has met the certification to be referred to a hiring manager. The hiring manager then interviews, selects from this list of people who they want to interview. In some cases, there may be a second interview, maybe a third interview, a peer interview. It just depends on the hiring manager, the team, and what that hiring manager wants to do. After that, they'll come back to me and say, we want to choose this person. I and a member of my team calls. Keep
No, go ahead.
Okay. I didn't know. Contacts the individual and speaks to them, has the conditional offer. Following the call, I send the conditional offer to the candidate. the candidate responds, accepts the, says, yes, I'm interested in joining DMPED. And that is when document collection happens. That is when DCHR becomes involved. So DCHR will then, as we're collecting the documents, we pass them on to DCHR as far as especially background checks. When people have to go and, they sign up on their own, the candidate signs up on his or her own for the background check. That information goes to DCHR. They let us know, if they've passed.
Okay.
Once all that is done and everyone, is clear to start at DMPED, we then provide the final offer letter. So DCHR clears them to be hired and we provide the final offer letter to the deputy mayor who signs it. That is the only part that the deputy mayor will have in the process. We give that to the candidate with the start date and they are then onboarded. Okay. So then their start date is whatever date they come, and they are paired with someone who is already at the agency, but is in their current position. So, we're going to pair someone in real estate with, a new hire in real estate with someone who's already been in real estate. Generally a tenured member who can share experiences and just kind of knows how to navigate.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Is it different for accepted service, or is that process the same for everybody?
So for accepted service, that goes through Mayor's Office of Talent and Appointments. That does not go through DMPED.
Okay.
But the only thing that the onboarding is the same.
Okay. How many positions, do you know how many accepted service positions DMPED has?
Not off the
Okay.
top of my head, but I can get back to you
If you
with
can
that.
get back to
with
us,
that.
that'd be great.
Absolutely.
And then let me turn, I'll pivot to just another question I had. We already did a line of question. I had a line of question earlier about this, but I just want to make sure I'm clear and it is clear in the record. Was DMPED given any follow-up responsibility following the completion of the 2 Malk investigations into former Deputy Mayor Fonchecchio?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Okay, and do you, in your experience, how long have you been the sexual harassment officer, by the way?
Give or take 3 months.
Okay, so it's subsequent to these investigations?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and there was a requirement, I believe, under the prior sexual harassment mayor's order for each agency to have a sexual harassment officer, correct?
Correct.
Do you have a predecessor who assumed that role or was in that role prior to you as a sexual harassment officer?
I do not.
Okay, how long have you been with DMPED?
Since April 25th, 2022.
Okay, April 2022.
April
And
2022.
since you've been at DMPED, are you aware of there being a sexual harassment officer?
No.
Okay. And is it fair to say there was no sexual harassment officer? Or do you know whether there was ever a sexual harassment officer under the tenure of the former deputy mayor?
Yes, there was a sexual harassment officer. And when she left, she was not immediately replaced.
Okay.
But there was a sexual harassment officer
When
during
when she left?
his tenure. I can get back. I'm not completely
Okay.
sure of the exact date that she.
Okay. All right, I'm going to turn to Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Chair McDuffie. I will just start with a brief statement and then jump to questions, but it is good to see both of you again. Workplace culture is the backbone of any organization, defining its character and values. A positive culture not only attracts and retains top talent, but also sets the tone for efficient and ethical operations. Conversely, a toxic culture can lead to a host of issues, none more concerning than sexual harassment. It is a blight that corrodes trust, equality, and overall productivity. It is not lost on me or anyone that is tuning into this hearing that the district is facing numerous challenges when it comes to planning and economic development, including the rebuilding downtown, distributing polluting land uses more equitably, and ensuring that all district residents are part of our comeback plan. I suspect that there are others besides me who wonder whether DMPED has made sufficient progress on its goals over the last few years and the degree to which workplace culture and the predatory conduct of the former deputy mayor was responsible. I appreciate that this office now has new leadership that is committed to charting a new path forward. However, it is never possible to fully address a problem unless we understand and acknowledge the scope of the underlying problem. I look forward to engaging in questions and better understanding the changes that have been implemented since the appointment of acting Deputy Mayor Albert. With that said, I want to jump to your pre-hearing responses, and I will apologize in advance as I just entered the hearing. Some of the questions may have already been asked and may be repetitive. So I will just start from the top. Is it accurate to say that based on your pre-hearing responses since March 17, 2023, there is an ongoing investigation into DMPED's hiring and promotion practices?
I think that's too broad a characterization. There were allegations made of unfair hiring practices, and those are being investigated by the former deputy mayor, and those are being investigated.
And who is doing that or conducting that investigation?
That has been tasked to the Inspector General.
And based on your responses, you're suggesting that that investigation is likely to be delayed because of council's action, also requiring the Inspector General to investigate sexual harassment. And so do you have a sense internally when you expect that investigation to be completed?
I don't have, no, we don't have that. We'll have to ask and get an answer from the Inspector General.
Okay. And so let's say the Inspector General says it'll be another year before we can conclude this investigation. Are there any steps that the agency is taking internally to investigate, look at, reflect on your hiring and promotion practices outside of the Inspector General?
Yeah, so we have spent some time talking about this today. First of all, in compliance with the new mayor's order, but as best practice, we've named a sexual harassment officer. That's Ms. Chambliss for the office. We've also communicated with all of our employees about if there are concerns, who they can go to with either EEO, sexual harassment, or other types of complaints about that. So that's handling the complaint side. I've also shared in my introduction to the team that I am in listening mode, and I'm trying to understand from the team what are the opportunities and what are their aspirations for what we do next. So just in terms of my introduction to the team and the tone that I'm trying to set, we put that forward. We spent some time today talking about an effort that's been ongoing to create a racial equity action plan.
Yes.
That racial equity action plan in its inception was really focused on racial equity in the office and kind of the practices that promote that and make sure that we have equity within our office. Since the allegations have been made and investigations have been done, we've also incorporated a line of questioning and involvement from employees so that we can also understand if there are more pervasive or other types of culture concerns within the office that we need to pay attention to. Our plan right now is to deliver no later than the end of this fiscal year, our updated equity action, our racial equity action plan. And I wanted to make clear to everybody that the racial equity action plan is not the end all be all. That is not a document that is a regulation for how one leads and manages. It's really important that I set the tone going forward as to what our core values as DMPED are. What are the things that we're going to hold each other accountable to? What are the tools that we're going to make available to employees as well as to managers? Make sure that they have the right training that is necessary to promote and maintain a strong culture. And then in the worst case scenarios, if there's a violation of those core values, that there is a place that employees can speak to. So that's sort of a summary of what we've been able to do to date.
And Acting Deputy Mayor, I really appreciate that. And I know you've been on the job roughly 2 months. And there's certainly work for you to do, and it will surely take time for you to assess where things are and make changes. It's also been roughly 9 months since March and the allegations that came to light of the previous deputy mayor. Do you have a sense of what preceded you, if anything, internally at DMPED to take action on the allegations that were made? Understanding that this doesn't all rest on at your feet, given you've only been here for 2 months, but it's been 9 months. And I find it hard to square that we're acting with urgency as a government, and it still may take another year almost for us to have a racial equity plan and other tangible deliverables when we heard about this back in March. Any sense of what actions preceded you?
Well, I'll speak broadly and then I'll allow Ms. Chambliss to speak to specifics. I think that the mayor and the administration acted very quickly once the allegations were made. A Mulk investigation was initiated almost immediately, within a week even. So I would say the complexity of the allegations are what is taking maybe some time as information is being brought forward. So just that's the response to a pretty serious set of complaints. So that is on its own path. Internally, also immediately an interim deputy mayor was named, Keith Anderson, who is a trusted leader within this administration, and immediately stepped up to the plate to provide stability and to provide leadership within DMPED. That was done immediately.
But in terms of addressing the allegations, I do recall that Mulk investigation that substantiated the sexual harassment claims and found that the workplace culture violations were unsubstantiated. Let me go in a different direction in my last roughly 2 minutes. And how many people are employed in DMPED generally?
Well, currently 77.
77.
We have 77, but
And how many of those people are people of color? Do you have that information?
absolutely 31,
31. How many
Yes.
are women?
43.
And do you have any marker of how many may identify as LGBTQ?
I do not.
Okay. Internally, has there been any effort to interview, survey the women or people of color on the team? And I know you talked about some of that, including your all-team meeting that it seems like you recently held, but has there been any tangible deliverable of the people of color on the team or the women on the team?
So that's part of the larger racial equity action plan. I know we keep referring to that, but that's part of that larger.
That's still about a year off.
No, there's been a survey, yes, to get anonymous feedback and honest response from employees.
Okay, and I guess what I'm trying to get at is I totally get the government moves slowly. I totally get acting deputy mayor that this isn't all on you, but now that you're at the helm, like how do we speed up or act with some urgency as we're waiting on the government to slowly move through its processes? And it would be great in the near future if there could just be some steps to address the very real and valid concerns that we've heard from people of color on the team as well as women.
I just want to be absolutely clear to everybody. I have a great sense of urgency.
Yes.
I have a great sense of urgency because this city needs to focus on our future.
That's right.
It's really, really important to me that our team is performing at its best in order to focus on our economic future. And so I have a great deal of urgency as well as experience and background in how to deliver high-performing teams. I have been a manager. My very first job out of college was to manage 40 people. That was in the military, where you get great training on how to manage people and how to lead teams. And so I don't need to wait on a plan in order to set the tone, to set the expectation, to create a culture of communication, and to start rebuilding trust. And so I just want to say the plan, I think, is where, again, more maybe nuanced and inclusive goals can be refined. But from the day that I stepped into this role, my eye has always been on making sure that the people within DEMPED have a safe culture or a safe place that they can go to if issues need to be brought forward. And I just bring a wealth of experience in management and leadership to be able to know how to handle and respond quickly to what those issues or concerns may be, as well as strategically.
Thank you. I am over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. We're going to turn to Councilmember Bonds for another round.
All right, and thank you very much, Chairman. I wanted to ask Ms. Chambers if during your tenure, you have received any complaints as it relates to sexual harassment.
I received one complaint, but it wasn't during my time as the sexual harassment officer. I'm just, sharing this. The person asked me, how do I file a complaint? I asked what kind of complaint. She said sexual harassment, and I referred it to a member of our general counsel.
All right, so you referred it.
Because at the time I was not the sexual harassment
I see.
officer. And so I referred it to our counsel just to understand. And then they took it. I didn't know, nothing else came.
Right.
I didn't have any more
All right.
involvement.
And can you give us some indication as to, was this at the beginning of your tenure? You said you came aboard in April of 2022. Yes. Or was it more recent?
No, this was within the current investigation. So this was just someone who reached out and said, how do I do this?
All right.
And I referred her, and the MOC took over.
All right. And so then, Ms. Albert, are you aware of this, or is this new news?
I wasn't aware of that. No, that was before I came here.
All right. Okay. I want to ask you, Ms. Albert, what do you think is the correlation between sexual harassment and workplace harassment? Such as, of course, what we've been discussing this morning, retaliation, low performance, evaluation scores, lack of promotional opportunities. Is there correlation between the two?
I think that's I could not broadly answer that. I think that typically there's not a correlation, I would guess. Sexual harassment is, tends to be a individual specific thing. But if there is a consistent and persistent culture of permission for bad behavior, I can see how over time that could permeate to other issues. I would certainly not want to start making assumptions about an individual case and an individual person and start implicating the rest of workplace culture. You've asked me questions today about whether or not I've seen a culture of bullying and harassment in DEMPED since I've been here in the last 2 months. And I can honestly say that I have not witnessed that. I do not think that that is what the culture of DEMPED is. And I think that the people of DEMPED would agree with that. Are there instances that we need to improve? Absolutely. Even the strongest organizational culture can always improve and make it better. And so I don't want to suggest that there isn't room for improvement. There absolutely is. There always is. But I have not experienced nor seen that this is a pervasive issue for the people who are currently in DEMPED today.
At the highest level person in DMPED, how do you ensure that your staff trust the agency's employment practices, that they are fair and equitable for all instead of for a select few and favored individuals?
That's a very good question, council member. I think that it really starts first with performance reviews, making sure that there's level setting with performance reviews. Organizations tend over time, every organization does this, start to inflate things or whatever. And so I think that, in fact, I was speaking with Ms. Chambliss when I first joined, we need to be doing desk audits probably every 5 years, because that's where you start to see over time, things start to inflate. So you got to just reset, go look. Are we overinflating? Are we, making sure that people understand that getting a 3 is being a solid performer and getting a 4 is going above and beyond, and getting a 5 is really excellence in performance, right? So there's, I think that discipline is really important to continue to implement. And also things like title inflation, or there tends to be in organizations a propensity to sort of sweeten over time. And so I think that there are practices that we will be putting into place to make sure that there's just consistency across. We mentioned that there are 3 major organizations. There's the chief of staff function, there's the business development group, and there's real estate. There also needs to be parity across those 3 different groups and organizations. So you have to keep level setting. What ensures that happens is that I hold managers accountable to making sure, hey, you gave this person a X, or a Y, like, what made them perform at that level. So it's also asking the right questions and letting people know that you're watching for that. Or if somebody didn't perform that well, why is it that you, help me validate that person didn't perform as well as you say they did?
I appreciate your answers on many fronts. Particularly as you were speaking, I was thinking that some who hear your response will say, my goodness, the deputy mayor, the acting deputy mayor is really tough and very precise in expectations from staff. And therefore, there may be some employees who would consider the toughness being an environment that they probably couldn't adjust to. What do you say about that? How do you manage those, that this is a new style, a new approach that I'm bringing to the table?
Well, for me, it's, there's a philosophy around evaluating employees. And there's this practice called the 9 grid, if you want to get into it, but where you evaluate somebody both on effort on one axis and on aptitude on the other. And so to me, I would value an employee who puts in great effort, but maybe has medium aptitude for that particular job. That to me is a valuable employee. The employee that has great aptitude but puts in low effort is not as great an employee. So I would say that there's room for all different kinds of people in an organization such as DMPED. But at the end of the day, DMPED is a leadership organization within this government. And it's really incredibly important that we attract talented and motivated people, and that they know what the standard of performance is so that they can achieve it. And so I have great expectation that people who might be, here's a lot of expectation. This is a journey. This is a partnership. I want to help people get to their best aptitude and put in their best effort, and they will be rewarded for that.
I want to thank you for your comments. Although we are not examining you today for whether or not this is a good fit for our government in the position that you've been appointed to, I must say that you've been hitting the mark each and every time. So thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Barnes. I just have a couple more questions before I turn back to Councilmember Parker. You had mentioned a couple of rounds ago, I was going to give you an opportunity to expand on a response earlier where you talked about, and I made a note somewhere. There we go. You talked about the workplace culture and you had taken the opportunity to meet with staff, hear concerns, and you even open it up to one-on-ones. You talked about a broad range of things that you heard. Can you give us some specifics about some of the things that you heard? Obviously not detailed enough where we're talking about names or anything like that, but generally speaking, what have you heard from your team?
Well, I think you're probably more interested in the critiques or the opportunities for improvement. So I'll focus on that, but I don't want that to be at the expense of acknowledging that people are really excited about the work that they're doing. So what I have heard so far that are areas of focus for me is people want to have more information about what's going on across the organization. That there's, they know what's going on with their colleagues within their own group, but they don't necessarily have visibility or transparency into what's happening with other groups. So I think that flow of information, what are the goals? Are we hitting the goals? They want access to that transparency. I've also heard that people want more access to different layers of leadership. There's a tendency to want to keep issues, pushed down. I think that's okay. I think that's right from an ownership perspective, but that shouldn't be at the expense of giving employees, because we are a small organization. Ms. Chambliss said that we're about 77, I think, right now. I think we have FTE up to about 80, 82. So it's a small organization. And the thing that I enjoyed when I was at DEMPED is that even though I was a project manager, I had access to the deputy mayor. And so we could be and should be a flat organization to some extent because we have to perform at a high level. So I heard that particularly from different types of managers that they wanted a little bit more fluidity and access to other managers and to the deputy mayor in particular. And then Councilmember Bonds mentioned this or touched on something, and I don't know if this was feedback from folks in the group, but different folks have said, hey, I gave this recommendation and it wasn't taken. And I think that that was the right way to go. And so, again, I think that creating a culture where if you really feel strongly that there's a policy impact, that there's a financial impact, that there's a community impact, and that recommendation wasn't taken, to create that open door to me to say, hey, is this the right decision? I think people want that access.
Okay. And earlier, I think it was during Councilmember Bonds' round, and earlier in my round, we had asked about complaints at DEMPED, and I believe you said, this is Ms. Chambliss, there's been one, but it was before you were the sexual harassment officer. I want to be clear as to whether or not that was a complaint or was it somebody asking a question about how to file a complaint? So I want to give you the opportunity to clarify. To your knowledge, was that a complaint? Was it something that was filed? Did the person who you provided that information to subsequently file a complaint?
Yes. So even though I was not the sexual harassment officer, like anyone else in the agency, this person knew to come to me to ask the question. So she is one of the complainants in the MOLC investigation. So once the first complaint and once it was made public, she reached out to me and said, how do I file a complaint?
Got it.
So
Okay.
That is
okay. And that's helpful to know. And because what we have from you all, we asked a specific question in the pre-hearing questions about the number of allegations received by the agency. And I want to make sure this is still accurate. The response you provided in question 4 of our pre-hearing questions was in fiscal year 2022, there were none. Is that still accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay. In fiscal year 2023, there were 2.
Correct.
And those are the 2 that have already been investigated?
So the 2 that so these 2 are independent of the other 2 because those 2 were not investigated by us. Those 2 were investigated by the MOLC. These two were internal and they were not related to sexual harassment. These
Okay.
were just internal kind of, manager, staff issues that we were able to handle at at DEMED.
Okay. So we specifically asked about sexual harassment though, and the response was 2. So is
Let's
that-
verify, we'll verify the response and make sure that it's accurate. And if an amendment needs to be made, we'll resubmit it.
Okay. And for fiscal year 2024, to date, the answer is none.
Correct.
And I know you all turned the responses in about a week and a half ago.
Yes,
Is that still accurate? Nothing since you turned in these?
correct.
Okay. Okay. And you'll get back to us about fiscal year 2023 with the clarification around 2?
Yes.
Okay. In your pre-hearing responses to question number 6, you talked about the steps that DEMPED has taken to improve workplace culture and strengthen internal practices. Under number 2, you mentioned that you held an all-staff meeting introducing the racial equity impact plan, action plan. We already went down there. We talked about it, I think, enough for me at least. But I did want to ask, when was that meeting?
I can get you the exact date,
Okay.
but we did have it. I can get you the exact date.
But do you know whether or not this was before or after you were designated as a sexual harassment?
After.
Okay, yeah, if you could follow up and also let us know that would be
Yes.
helpful. I'm going to turn to Councilmember Parker.
Thank you. I recall you mentioning that since former Deputy Mayor Falchicchio's exit, there have been 7 people hired. And since acting Deputy Mayor Albert, there's been 1. That's accurate?
Correct.
How many people have left the agency since March and October, respectively?
$13.
13 since March,
9. I apologize. 9.
9 since
9
March.
since March. Yep. 9.
Any since October?
No.
Okay.
No, not recently.
So 9 people have left. And I'm not gonna ask you right now, but is there a way you can provide demographic information for those 9 individuals to the committee? Okay,
Yes.
awesome.
Okay.
What is the working relationship between you two, acting Deputy Mayor and Ms. Chambliss? And so I know the roles, but like Ms. Chambliss, who manages you within the agency?
Deputy Mayor Albert.
Okay. And how often are you all checking in about allegations or your workload?
Pretty consistently.
Okay.
Pretty regularly.
And related, what is the process for someone to file a sexual harassment complaint? So yes, they would come to you, Ms. Chambliss.
Yes.
But walk me through that process, that someone comes to you and then what happens?
So they come to me and it depends on who the person, who the person is. The person who they're accusing of the harassment. If it's somebody, a deputy mayor, that would go through the CA's office. I would not investigate.
So,
that.
but walk
But
me
I-
through that. So if that allegation was made, would you directly relay the message to
Yes,
the city administrator?
Yes, they would come to me first as the sexual harassment officer. So I'm the person that they would know to go to.
And if
then-
it's not involving the deputy mayor, then you would report that to the deputy mayor.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any backstop measure? So like, if it's not the deputy mayor, how do we verify that the action is being followed up on?
So that would be following the mayor's order and me as the sexual harassment officer, taking the steps outlined. So receiving a complaint from someone and then me following up on that complaint and then referring it as necessary to.
But hypothetically
Yes.
speaking, let's say someone made an allegation not involving the deputy mayor.
Mhm.
You relay the information to the deputy mayor.
Without, we have a complaint. That would be the
Yes.
most I would say. I wouldn't
And
go into any
then-
specifics.
And then what happens?
And then I take on the task of investigating as much as, investigating the
And
issue.
let's say
So-
you find that these allegations are credible, but for some reason, the deputy mayor, and I'm not suggesting this would be the situation with this deputy mayor, but just hypothetically speaking, let's say the deputy mayor is not taking action, then what happens?
Then I would likely consult with the MOC for next steps
Got
to
it.
figure out, next steps, but I don't think that.
A couple things. I want to just correct the record. Ms. Chambliss technically reports to the chief of staff of the office, who reports to me. Just wanted to make sure that the record's correct. In terms of things like sexual harassment, workplace bullying, things that are, to me, aggressions, human to human aggressions, I have zero tolerance for. I'm just putting that on the record as well. But in the case, and that Ms. Chambliss would, as a sexual harassment officer, by the way, she's been trained. She has specific training to handle an investigation and take in a complaint of that nature. There are other avenues that if there is not action being taken by the management structure within the agency, that then, as she mentioned, she could go to the city administrator's office. She could go to the MOLC. So there's other avenues so that action can be taken. And to me, that is what the expectation is.
Yep. Thank you for that. And I asked those questions based on the allegations previously made of fear and intimidation and/or people not taking action on allegations when they were made. For reports of workplace bullying, is it the same process? Someone would come to you and then you would report and follow up?
Yes.
Okay. A few other questions. I know you have to follow up, but it was mentioned in fiscal year 23, 2 people have come forward with sexual harassment claims. Is there a way, acting deputy mayor, that we can make the investigation more proactive on the part of the agency, just given the history within the agency, that through that survey, I'm assuming maybe you're going to make that annual, there could be some question, have there been any situations or behaviors that have made you feel uncomfortable versus making it purely the responsibility of the individual to report it? Does that make sense? Are you willing to take steps and make a commitment to being more proactive and surveying whether or not there have been sexual harassment issues and/or workplace bullying issues within the agency?
I personally believe that because the nature of sexual harassment and bullying is really immediate, that it's important that we create a culture and the resources necessary and transparent for those people to address that issue right away. That's not something that I think is the type of complaint or concern that can wait. I think that we can survey general feelings of employee satisfaction, workplace culture, feeling valued or listened to by, managers, and we can go into other things like that. But as it pertains specifically, in my opinion, to bullying, violence, sexual harassment, I would really prefer that gets handled immediately and that complaint be brought forward.
I would agree with that. the numbers suggest that when one allegation was made, there were others that went unearthed, which to me suggests that individuals, after having been harassed, didn't necessarily come forward. I would imagine the same may be true in the future, not just within your agency, but just in general. And there are ways in which leadership can proactively ask or give the sentiment that it's open and fair for you to report these things. And so I would recommend if that is something you might want to consider, just given some of the considerations of what has happened within the agency. I have one more question just based on timeline. We are about 2 months away from performance oversight when DMPED will come and talk about all the great things the agency has done in the past fiscal year. I am coming back to this feeling that not enough has happened as we're waiting on government to move, and government usually moves slowly. That's not necessarily your fault, acting deputy mayor. But can we get a commitment that within the next 2 months, there will be some interim step or steps taken to address both sexual harassment and workplace culture issues within the agency, whether that's a new survey, whether that's a new structure, because while I know there have been steps taken in terms of appointing Ms. Chambliss, for instance, I would love for the city to see that the agency is taking action. And even while in 2 months, we may not have all of that fully fleshed out, it would be great if we could have some commitment that we can receive some update by that point.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. And then last question for me, what is your performance evaluation process? And have you or are you planning to change the process given what you've learned through the meetings you've held so far? Either
What the process is. We follow DCHR's performance evaluation process. So that is going in, all managers input information into PeopleSoft. So that is our performance evaluation process.
And are there any changes being made to the process given allegations that have previously been made?
No, I don't think there's changes to the process itself. The process is what it is. It's widely practiced throughout the District of Columbia. The things that I'm really looking for is consistency in how people are evaluated. So that's kind of an area of focus. And then the other is making sure that we have regular check-ins, meaning there's typically a mid-year review as well as an end-of-year review. The reason that that is so important to do and to do consistently is it is a neutral time and a time that everybody has to talk to each other about performance. So it's a time where you can have tough conversations as well as good conversations, and people know where they stand. And that to me is one of the most valuable times, both as a receiving employee as well as a manager, to connect. And so I would like that to be very consistent year over year, so that people know. It's often an awkward time for people, but it is the honest time to talk about how they're performing and to allow employees to say what they need.
Yes.
And so those are the two immediate things that I'm looking to implement.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna go one final 5-minute round.
Yes.
Councilmember Bonds.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I wanted to just explore for a minute some of the comments that you may have gotten from employees, but this time to talk about proposed or thoughts about organization changes. I know you've gotten a lot of ideas from individuals, but have you gotten some specific requests or in change of, I guess, the way assignments are given to staff? Anything along those lines?
I have not received any feedback along those lines. I mean, I'd certainly be open to it, but I haven't received that yet.
All right. I'm just trying to go deeper into the kinds of real feedback that you're getting. Yes, everyone will be, as I say, aggressive, you say passionate about what they want to do and how they're doing it. but I'm just curious about how the dynamics work, and whether or not there's been any, for instance, any thought or anything shared with you that might say, I really want to be able to talk directly with my manager and not be blocked by another manager who thinks they know more about what I'm doing. I'm, trying to think about the kind of the context as well as the comments that you would get from individuals.
I mean, I have, well, what you just said right then about, some feedback that I've gotten about people wanting to, have more freedom to reach out to other types of managers. I have received that feedback. It's a little bit different than, the first question that you asked, which is, how assignments are given out or things like that, or a change in the organizational structure. I have not received those kinds of comments yet.
So have you received comments from anyone that would suggest that if they do not get a particular task done, that it could be that they would be almost excommunicated from doing that kind of work? I'm trying to be as real as possible without, names and stuff like
I have not received that
Okay.
kind of commentary. I will say, I think that there's lots of avenues that people can share information. Obviously, this committee has polled DemPed staff. I would be extraordinarily grateful if you can anonymize it anyway, but getting a high level feedback for my own purposes to know what kinds of comments you're getting. That helps me do a better job in figuring out how to continue to improve and make stronger the DemPed culture.
I appreciate that. One last kind of example is, do you anticipate, and if it happens, a situation where staff has given an opinion and a recommendation, and you decide you don't need to follow it? How do you communicate back to that individual in such a way that they do not feel disenfranchised from the whole process?
Well, I mean, I think that communicating is the first key, just sharing the logic of why you didn't follow, what was being recommended, so that they can learn from that. Very many times as managers, we're put in positions of having to manage a number of different priorities, and one individual project decision impacts maybe, and in fact, in DemPed projects, very often it comes about money, where there might be one project that is competing with another and we have limited resources. And so we have to make decisions that are at the portfolio level and not at the individual project level. But I think explaining that to people is really important, because then one, they understand and they get better as project managers of considering a whole, and they have some context for it. But I am a big believer in empowering the employee. I'm also a big believer in empowering managers. And I think that proper training, particularly around communication, is key to a manager's success.
All right, well, I've passed my time limit. Thank you. Thank you Thank you both for your testimony today. Thank you.
And thank you, Councilmember. Just, I think I just have two final questions. Actually, maybe just one final question. If I can get my computer to stop going to sleep so quickly. So in terms of the workplace culture, I know it sounds like, it sounds to me like you are really focused on this and have spent some time since you've been there, in the short time you've been there, to get a sense for what staff think, any concerns, and I appreciate that, and I mean that sincerely. Do you feel like the culture, the workplace culture that exists today is what it needs to be? Or do you feel like it is still a work in progress?
I think that there are improvements that can be made. I think that more management training would be helpful. I think more transparency and communication of goals, of priorities, of logic, like there's just a little bit more communication that needs to go on. And that's, I feel, my responsibility. And I've already spoken with my staff about how to do that and to get some regular communication meetings, things that offer more opportunity for questions by staff. And then lastly, I think that consistency is incredibly important. And so I'm looking at consistency of process and clarity of communication around what the expectations are. I think that when you have that, communications, clarity of what the expectation is, as well as continued opportunity for community within the staff, that is, to me, when I think I'll feel satisfied and that we can, those are the fundamentals that I think we need to keep perfecting. And frankly, I don't think that that will take very long.
Okay. I'll say that it may require something a little bit more formal in terms of the process used to review the workplace culture and perhaps ways in which people can give that feedback. I know I mean, you've talked a number of times about communication, and I think it is key in the environment in which people can communicate, right? Whether it's filing complaint or whether it is, some desire to maybe be promoted or to get access to you or to, maybe be assigned to something else that sort of keeps their trajectory within the agency going. But in light of everything that took place before you arrive, I think you should consider whether that process is a little bit more formal. And I say that because, as I mentioned in my opening, we sent an email to all DEMPED staff, and we actually did get a couple of people who responded to us. And I'm not sure if they responded to you formally or informally, but I think you'll be best equipped to be able to do all those things that you've articulated, which I think are absolutely critical. Unless it is a formal process and perhaps a way for people to be able to do so, if they don't want everybody to know. And I know, Ms. Chambliss, you talked about a process of people, filing complaints and things confidentially, but maybe it's not a complaint of harassment or anything else. But so I would ask you to really commit to thinking about whether there needs to be a more formal process. As I mentioned also earlier, we've got your hearing on January 11th, I believe it is, and then we're going to get into both performance and budget oversight in February and March, respectively. I'm going to keep asking about this. Right. I always ask about racial equity, by the way, and so I'm glad to hear that you all are working on a racial equity action plan. I think it's definitely long overdue. But I'm going to be asking about these items, and I also would ask that you consider whether there are some things that DEMPED can do to address the allegation of retaliation that is associated with Mr. Falchicchio's tenure as deputy mayor. Not anything that would undermine an existing investigation, but I think it is important for you as the deputy mayor to know whether you still have an individual or individuals on your staff who have engaged in some workplace retaliation. And so I would make that ask as well, and I'm sure that I will follow up when we see each other the next time. I don't have any additional questions at this point. I want to thank Councilmember Bonds and Councilmember Parker for attending the hearing. I'm going to turn it to you at this point for any final thoughts that either of you may have.
I'll just, well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to talk about this. As I mentioned, mission first, people always is the mantra that I live by. And I never shy away from an opportunity to talk about how to make culture and the experience better for our people. I take to heart sort of the feedback that you've gotten. And again, it will make me better if I can understand some of those things so I can myself start to plan around them. I came from an organization in the General Services Administration where they had annual employee viewpoint surveys so that they could reach out anonymously and get employees' feedback on all kinds of things, very often about culture as well as resources. And so I like that as a framework for maybe how we get that feedback. But culture is a continuous improvement task. We constantly and consistently have to be focused on our people. We have to understand what they're really thinking so that we as managers can continue to make it better. And so that's my commitment. I want to leave DEMPED in a better place when I leave than when I found it. And I look forward to working with the staff of DEMPED and as well as with you to ensure that we are performing at our best, because what we need to be doing is focusing on the economic development and prosperity of the city and to serving the residents of the District of Columbia to the best of our ability. And that has to be done on a strong culture.
And so, again, thank you to you both for your testimony this afternoon. There being no further business before the committee. The time is now 12:45 p.m. And this marks the end of today's Oversight Roundtable. Thank you.